Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. November is National Family Caregivers Month, and it's a special time for us to recognize, support, and empower our family caregivers. While every month should absolutely be Family Caregiver Appreciation Month, this month, ALS Texas is really taking time to dedicate extra focus and recognition on supporting the more than 78 million people in the United States who dedicate their time, most often unpaid, and also altering their ability or changing their schedules to work outside the home and caring for a loved one. 78 million people in the United States. If we translate that even more, we have in the state of Texas right now 950 registered families in the state of Texas who are living with ALS. So we know that there's a good chance that there's close to 1,000 family caregivers that are caring for a loved one. As we approach the holiday season, a lot of time and focus is placed on family and quality time. And it's really important that we show appreciation to caregivers too. It's tireless work. The commitment of a caregiver is unlike any other. It's not something that you sign up for, and it's not something that you can opt out of. It's all the time, it's 24/7. And in fact, the theme that National Family Caregiver Month adopted this year was caregiving around the clock. And I think that's something that summarizes that it's not just for a part of a day, it's all the time. So that care comes in a number of ways. It's financial, it's medical, it's emotional, it's support in all ways. And we must never underestimate the strength that caregivers have in providing support for their loved ones that need it most, nor the toll that it can take on them emotionally and physically. And that's sometimes something that we don't focus enough on. Today, we're talking about the ALS experience, caregiving experience, especially from the perspective of a male caregiver. Tyler Wood in Lubbock, Texas, guns up, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I know that these are things I know, and I'm gonna let him share a little bit more, but I know that he is a husband, father, barbecue pit master. I've seen some of his work, and I want to hear about the knife work that you do too, and so much more. And you also possess the incredible gift of a sense of humor, which has made me chuckle out loud more than once. And I think it's so key when we talk about the ALS experience. I think it's something you have to have. And it sounds crazy, but I think it's a fact. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Before I let Tyler have the floor, I think most of us are pretty familiar with the Zoom platform, but just in case you are not, know that you have a chat box on here. You can add questions, you can give a shout out to Tyler, you can give him a clap, give him a high five, if there's something that really resonates with you, or you can post some questions in there. We'll have some time after this for some questions, or we can follow up at another time if you'd rather as well. This is a safe place. When we talk about caregiving, while sense of humor is important, it's also tough. We talk about things that are tough. So for anybody that's on here today, if you don't want to have your video display on because you just want to take it in, you want to connect, and you want to do that privately, it's a safe place to do that. We'd love to see your face and connect because we're all in this together, right? But you do what's comfortable for you, and there's no judgment. This is a safe place just to know that we have a community that is linking arms and is sharing an experience. So feel free to use the chat box. Everyone will be muted so that we can hear Tyler talk and we can hear his perspective that I'm sure many of you can relate to. So again, use your chat box, use your reactions, and feel free to engage as well. So Tyler, we're so glad you took time out today. I know your schedule's busy, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your current experience and journey with ALS.
Well, like you said, I am a husband to a wife who was diagnosed with ALS in 2018. I'm a father to 3 boys, 17, 13, and 10. My 10-year-old has Down syndrome. And so I've been dealing with a little bit of the caretaker for quite a while now with him, as special needs child. He still requires lots of special attention, but it has been in the last 2 years taken on a lot heavier duty of being a caregiver. Like you said, a barbecue pit master, I don't know I'd go that far, but I do enjoy doing barbecue. Mostly I do cured and smoked meats like hams, bacon, sausage, and stuff like that. And also piddling, making knives and selling those. So somewhat have a side business as well as working full time for an architectural firm in Lubbock called MWM Architects. They're a very great group of people to work for. They've allowed me to stay home and work from home to hopefully protect myself from COVID, but also to be able to stay home and help take care of my wife a lot better. So an excellent group of people to work for. But so full-time job, part-time job, making cured meats and stuff to help make ends meet, and then full-time caregiver to a wife with ALS and a son with Down syndrome. So like I said, it's a full-time schedule, but I'm glad to be able to take a few minutes out and hopefully help some other people out and lift them up and support by sharing my story and hopefully giving them some tips and tricks that I use to help them out as well.
Absolutely. And we sure do appreciate it. And, we'll get into it more in a little bit, but you said some key things that I think are so important. I mean, whether you're a barbecue pit master or doing it for fun and doing it well, or all of those things, it's important to have things that you enjoy, that you're
Yes.
doing too. It's so easy because it's caregiving around the clock to be focused on caring for your family as the leader of the house. If you don't have an outlet, it's not good for you and it's not good for them. So I think that's so important, and I want to hear more about that. And hopefully everyone that's joining us today will, if they're not doing that, will realize it's not selfish to do that. In fact, it's good, and it's imperative.
Yes, you have to. If you don't take time out to take care of yourself, and that's not just, feeding yourself and clothing yourself and grooming yourself, that has to happen. I'm talking about the time that you set aside once a week, once a month, every 3 months, whatever your schedule dictates. But to be able to sit down and take some time for yourself to clear your head and to clear the stress. If you don't, you're going to fail miserably, because an unhealthy person, both mentally and physically, cannot care for somebody else efficiently. So you have to make sure that your health, and not just physical, but mental health, is fit and you're ready to go for the next round of battles that inevitably is going to come.
Absolutely. So true. I have really spent, and our entire team does the same thing, listening. You and I have had conversations where I said, I just want to hear, what we're doing well, what you need, what caregivers need. And I was talking to a caregiver last week and telling her about some of the support we had and focusing on self-care. And she said, I don't have time to do that. I said, you can't afford not to make the time to do it.
Agreed completely.
Yeah, it's got to be a focus. And, in the last year, to add to that, ALS Texas has added a lot of programming and support. COVID changed our world too, but we were able to add a lot more virtual programming education for every member of the family. It was already on our focus, but we were able to launch that even sooner than we expected. We've got programs for youth and children age 5 all the way up to 25, and really for caregivers, and making sure you do have that support. I know, again, you and I have had a couple of conversations, but since Melinda's diagnosis, what has ALS Texas helped provide y'all that's been most helpful? Those are the things we want to really make sure that we keep doing.
It has given us contacts, and I say that's the most important thing. getting equipment and stuff like that for, supporting your life in your house is good. And it is one of the things, we've received a shower chair from y'all. And right now, that's luckily been the only thing we've needed from y'all. But the most important thing has been information and contacts. I know being in a small town in the middle of West Texas desert, I'm 45 minutes south of Lubbock. And we're out in the middle of nowhere. The doctors here have had maybe 2-3 patients with ALS that they've ever seen, let alone treated themselves. Then you get to Lubbock and there's no clinic there for ALS specific. You have neurologists, and very few of those have dealt with ALS in a continuous care that is needed. So through the ALS Association, we were able to get information about the clinics in the rest of the state and get tied into those, as well as get tied in with other people in the area who are struggling with ALS themselves. And we've been able to create our own small group here and support each other through that group, even though, it's not directly tied to the ALS Association. Without the ALS Association giving information to the people who are signing up to find out, hey, there is a group in Lubbock. It's not necessarily ALS Association inspired or associated with them. Getting that information to those people where they can get that information and have a support group to call on when they need it. So the biggest thing to me has been the contacts and the information, because out here in the middle of West Texas, we're sorely depleted of resources for the community that struggles. And, for a 350,000 population city, having, I think it's 58 to 60 people in the area with ALS, that's a pretty big population to be not having that much information. So having the association at least have the contact information that we can get to has been a tremendous help for me and my wife.
Good. I agree. For that population, there's a lot more that everyone, I know we are focused on more resources for out there, and looking, at a clinic out there. That's been on our radar for years, but I'm happy to hear that at least the information and connections, those are so key. Connections at clinic, connections and knowing who to reach out to. Because so many times it's, what do I do? Who do I call? And to have that. So that, I'm glad that we've been able to bridge that gap as we continue to build bridges to some bigger things too. We talked about caregiving being around the clock. So it's really hard for this next question to say, how much time do you estimate out of your busy day is in caregiving? But it probably sounds like it doesn't stop.
I'm actually pretty lucky in that, my wife's ALS progression has been relatively slow. And, we're 2 years in and she's still walking and still doing some things for herself, still able to bathe herself. So, I've been extremely lucky in that the minutia of every sip of water, every bite of food has not come yet. And I feel for those who have reached that point, because, there are times when even with what I'm dealing with now, I struggle. I can't imagine, having to be there to pat the cheek that has saliva running down it, or, to do all the other things. We don't think about the care that a person requires until, you start having to clip their fingernails. You start having to clip the toenails and help them shave their legs and their underarms, or, whatever it is that they want to feel normal as much as possible. And we often forget the amount of time that it takes for that. And it's shoehorning 25 pounds into a 20-pound bag when it's hours of the day,
Yeah.
because my day has always been full of, my job, then my hobbies and my kids and my side business. And so, that was 24/7, 365. And now I've got to take care of another person like I've got to take care of myself. And it's trimming the fat, really, and figuring
Mm-hmm.
out what the important stuff. But like you said, on the self-care, you have to make sure that you're not trimming all of your stuff out. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have to give yourself time. And that's part of the care of your spouse, is caring for yourself. Because when you take care of them, you give out of yourself. And it's a bucket of water. Every time you pour out of yourself a little bit, there's less in that bucket for you to have for yourself. And when that bucket's dry, you're not going to be of use to yourself or your spouse. But it's so when you ask how much time of the day, well, it's like you said, it's every minute of the day, because you're not just caring for your spouse in that daily care. You're caring for yourself so you can continue to care for your spouse.
And
So
you have to
even
be
if
intentional in that. And that's work too, to say, you know what have I done for myself that's going to help me be able to take care of me and others? And you have to be mindful of that. And that's even work. You have to be focused on it.
well, I'm blessed that this week I'm going to be heading out to a fishing trip for a few days. But I understand I've got to take the time away from my wife to recharge my batteries, to get myself emotionally ready for the next bout, or I'm going to be to that breaking point. And when you reach that breaking point and you have nothing left to give, both you and your spouse who you're supporting are going to struggle, and it's going to hurt both of you.
Yeah,
So, but
absolutely. I'm so glad that you're doing that. Yeah, you got to get away. And the great outdoors is one of the best ways. And you touched on something that I think is really important too. And I'm impressed. And I think it's something that we don't want to pass over. You mentioned, shaving your arms, grooming, things that a lot of guys, let's just be honest, may not think about when you're thinking about caring for a loved one. And especially if it's your wife who's living with ALS, you have to think, what can I help with? What should I help with? What does she need that I may not think about each day? So how has that changed for you?
I do not like touching feet. So to be clipping her toenails, painting her toes, and doing all that stuff, you really start to think about what attracted you to your spouse. And part of that is, especially for y'all's ladies, is y'all's grooming. The makeup, the manicured nails and the toenails and the shaved legs. You know, as men, we don't think about that stuff, but you know, the ladies, they still want to look pretty. They still want to feel pretty. And feeling pretty for a woman is huge. And I know this because my wife just posted something on Facebook that about made me cry yesterday. My wife and I celebrated our 23rd anniversary. And
Happy anniversary.
thank you. One of the things she posted on there was that, the little things, the clip in the toenails makes her feel pretty. And how important is that to our spouses, that they feel normal and they still feel pretty? So it's almost like you got to think about being the opposite sex and what they think is important. And you've got to try to make that important to yourself as well. And I'm I'm not world's best groomer. You can tell I've got a huge beard. You know,
I like it. You're rocking the beard.
I'm a low maintenance guy. So for a high maintenance care woman like my wife, who always had clipped fingernails, pretty makeup every day, hair fixed every day, not feeling like it, doing it for herself, it's down on her. But when you take the time and make her feel pretty, it's amazing the glow that comes out of her, and the more zeal for life that she has despite the situation that she's in. And it makes her want to struggle harder to continue on rather than losing hope and becoming depressed. And so the small things can make a huge amount of difference for her emotional well-being. And so that's got to become important to you to help her continue to fight.
Absolutely. Gosh, I love hearing that. We have 11 multidisciplinary clinics throughout the state. And when you're at clinic, you talk about a lot of stuff. It's a long day. You know that. I saw y'all recently. You talk about a lot of things. You're talking to a lot of different specialists, and it's a 3 or 4 hour day. But what you don't usually talk about, I'm not going to say always, but you don't usually talk about what you just shared and how important that is. You're talking about equipment needs, or what do we need to do at home? But it's that emotional connection that spouses need to maintain. They have to maintain no matter where you are in the ALS journey. And I think that's so powerful. I'm glad that you shared about that.
Not a problem.
What has been your biggest challenge, or what is your biggest challenge now as a caregiver? Can you pick one aspect?
Thinking like a woman.
It's a dangerous place to go, isn't it?
Oh, it's scary. Please do not throw tomatoes at me on the chat. I'm just kidding. No, but in all honesty, like I was talking about in the caring for you have to think of what's important to her. So you have to somewhat get inside a woman's head as a male caregiver, and that's dang near impossible for us guys. We are completely wired differently, and it's intentionally wired differently. So
That's true.
to have to take your priorities and toss them out the window and think about what her priorities are so you can give appropriate care, that by far is the hardest. It's the mental game that you have to play with yourself. And that is why it's so important to take care of yourself, because mental is the most strenuous, tiring aspect of the entire thing. Physically, you can sleep and sleep in on a weekend and you're probably going to feel a little better. But mentally, if you're not taking the time to rest your emotions and your mind, you're not going to make it. You're just simply not. And I've seen too many close friends and family who have had to deal with situations, whether it be cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, whatever it is. They're not able to survive and continue, and they end up leaving, or they end up, putting them in a home or something like that for somebody else to care for them, because they didn't take the time to take care of themselves mentally. It's not a physical game. The physical part for me is actually pretty easy. I've got a degenerative arthritis, and so I limp along some days, but yet, I'm still really able to do the physical part pretty easily with rest and relaxation a little bit. But man, if you don't take the time for mentally preparing yourself, you're not going to make it. I'm sorry to tell the people out there. And, like I said, I'm taking a fishing trip. It's not because I want to go fishing. I need to clear my mind. I need that relaxation where I'm not having the daily strain mentally for 2 or 3 days to rest my brain and my emotions. And you talk about it being Caregivers Month and the people who are giving care to the ALS patients. You've got to give care to two people, the person with ALS and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, the person with the ALS is going to struggle with it the most,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to see that you're not into it, that you're not able to do it. Now, you may go through the motions of doing it, fulfilling the physical aspect, but the joy in doing it, the love and the compassion that's there will be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, it's not humanly able to be done if you're not emotionally invested into it.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I've met your beautiful bride a couple of times, and I know that she can tell that your heart's in it. And I love watching you two together in the times that I've seen y'all. So you're right. She feels it because she knows that you feel it. And, again, we talk a lot about it, well, in clinical terms, about ALS.
Yeah.
We don't touch on it enough when we talk about, or we don't touch on trauma and resiliency enough. And you touched on that. ALS, the diagnosis is a trauma the day you get, actually leading up to it. There's usually lots of doctor's appointments, ruling out, second opinions, all of that. And there's trauma. And a big part of trauma is resiliency, how we move forward, and all the things that you said. One of the things I was going to ask you is, what are your words of encouragement for others? And you just laid all that out. It's do it with heart, take time for yourself, and you've got to be mentally prepared more than anything for the journey and experience.
Yes, it's not easy. And like
Yeah.
like I said earlier, I'm in the easy portion of it right now. I'm not having to feed my wife. I'm not having to hold a feeding tube and pour the solution in there. I'm not having to, clear her airway out or anything else like that with the cough assist. I can't imagine what it is to do all that on a day in, day out basis. And I already know the struggle that I'm having with it, so you have to prepare yourself. And part of that's doing research and knowing what's going to be required of you. And it's depressing. My word, it's depressing looking at, the people around me in the support group, at where some of them are, and thinking, that's what this disease has in store for my wife. And it hurts. And if you're not prepared for that, you need to mentally prepare yourself for the inevitability of the disease. And that is total care for your spouse. That's, like I said, wiping the drool off the cheek, wiping wiping their backsides when they're not able to do that anymore. It's, the minutia of everyday life that is going to come. If you're not prepared for it, you're not going to make it. So knowing what's in advance for you, researching it, and being prepared mentally, and having the right tools ahead of time is so huge.
It is. I mean, Tyler, we couldn't have ended that perfectly with those words of, and empowerment, encouragement, and really it's pleading with everyone. You've got to be focused on that. You've got to be prepared. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day, for sharing, again, candid thoughts and real talk. I hope, and I speak for all of us at the ALS Texas team, that you keep reaching out to us. You talked about information, contacts. Reach out to us. I know you've got my phone number. You know how to reach us, and we want to be there for you in any way that we can. And I just really appreciate you taking time out. I know you're busy, but in just my conversations with you, I knew that we all needed to hear from you today from the male perspective. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. And, if I can just give one more thing, is just
Sure, absolutely.
hug your spouse. No matter what you're going through, they're going through it worse. Yes, you're having to do the cleaning, you're having to do the cooking, but they're having to watch you do all that. They're having to watch you struggle, wishing that they could do every single thing that you're having to do. Hug them, love them, show them compassion, because, it's not their fault. They didn't want it. Y'all are both struggling, but, they wish they were able to do what you're having to do. Hug them, love them, and make sure that they know that they're continuously loved.
Thank you for that, Tyler.